I'm Miguel M. Standing Masicampo, Villamor. My friends call me Mike for short. I'm a retired Brigadier General of our Armed Forces of the Philippines.
So your first name is Miguel, M-I-G-U-E-L, middle name M as in Mary, and your last name is Villamor, V as in Victory, I-L-L-M-O-R, right?
Correct.
Great.
Thank you.
What is your birthday?
Where is my?
Birthday. Birthday. When were you born?
I was born in Cebu City. That's a city in the Cebu province in the Visayas of the Philippine Republic.
And when were you born? Birthday.
My birthday is 31 March 1926.
So tell me about your family background when you were growing up. What did your father do?
What is my
father? Your father.
Father's name? No. My father's name?
No. Your father. What did your father do?
My father has been a merchant. He's a businessman, a merchant at Cebu City. Ever since I was born, I only knew that he supported our family because he was a businessman. And the one that I am very much concerned was when he had the concession of all the coconut plantation of the government along the central road of Cebu City. Just imagine several thousands or millions of coconut trees. And my father would then have certain areas where coconuts are harvested and converted into copra in order to provide coconut oil for the entire city.
Okay. So when did you join the military?
I joined the military after the Japanese occupation, which was something like 1945.
Yeah.
And we got our independence in 1945. And then I finished my high school in yes, that's right. I finished my high school in 1946. And thereafter, I was able to apply for a admission to the Philippine Military Academy. And luckily, I was one of the candidates, or I was appointed as a cadet of the Philippine Military Academy in March of 1947. That's it, 1947. And that's where my military career started.
Wow.
With the Philippine Military Academy.
So tell me about how was it being under the Japanese occupation in the Philippines?
Yes.
How was Japanese treating people here in Philippines?
Yes. Since I was only 19, I was only 40, pardon me, I was only 15 years old, and I barely finished high school. And as I knew, when the Japanese occupation, all we did was get out from the city because, unfortunately, the house in our city got included in the bombing of the Japanese at the time they attacked the Visayas area at Cebu City. So when there was no more place for us to, our home in the Cebu City, we moved over to a small out of the city, which is about 30 kilometers, a little farm which my father has organized. And there we stayed and hid in the mountains now and then when the Japanese came around, or when we learned that the Japanese were coming around to to recruit young boys, my father or mother would say, let's go over to the next hill in order to avoid the Japanese. So my experience with the Japanese is very limited because my family avoided Japanese occupation as much as possible.
Lucky.
Yeah.
Very lucky. So when did you graduate Army Academy?
After being admitted to the academy in 1947, we finally graduated in 1951. 51.
So already Korean War broke out when you were in the Army Academy cadet, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So what do they say about the Korean War? Already Philippines dispatched the 10th Battalion Combat Team to Korea, right?
Okay. Well, since I was already in the military service in 1951, we were immediately deployed to our battalion combat teams in order to attend to our as a counter-insurgency with our insurgency in the province. I was assigned to a certain 15th Battalion Combat Team for about 2 or 3 years until I finally got my orders to join the 2nd Battalion Combat Team. We only learned about the invasion in Korea when joining the 2nd Battalion Combat Team. We were informed that we are the last battalion to be organized because much earlier, sometime in 1950, when the war broke out in South Korea, our government, our president, then committed 1 battalion combat team to participate in the Korean War. This was on the request of the United Nations Command, and our president then, President Quirino, has obliged and felt that with the approval of the Filipino people, we should participate at an attempt to be able to restore democracy and freedom at the Korean Peninsula. So my impression then, having been already transferred to a 2nd Battalion Combat Team, which was supposed to be a replacement battalion for the pep talk, we were brought to an area in Marikorea or Marikina City, which is part of the metropolitan area. And there we established, or rather, we followed the 14th BCT that was also trained before they left for deployment in South Korea.
So when did you arrive in Korea?
We trained in Korea for some time, as early as 1953, and then eventually when we were informed that the 14th BCT, 14 BCT has already completed its almost 1 year, we were alerted to leave for Korea sometime March of 1954.
54?
Yes.
So you were not here. When did you arrive in Korea?
We arrived in Korea at April 1954. Yes.
So that was after the war?
Yes. We were informed that there was a cessation of fire insofar as the Korean Peninsula was concerned, and there was an attempt to be able to come up with a peace treaty. But we were informed that it remained that there was no more firing, there was no more fighting, and the United Nations agreed to a cessation of fire and a declaration of the demarcation, or DMZ, they call it.
Yep. So you were, tell me, you didn't know much about Korea before you came to Korea, right? And then when you arrived, how was Korea look to you? How was it?
Oh, yes. We finished our tour of duty. We finished our tour of duty with the 2nd Battalion Combat Team after being there up to about May of 1955, or less than 54 to 55, less than a year, because we understood that there was already an attempt for a peace treaty insofar as the North and South Koreans were concerned, but there was relative peace in the peninsula already.
Yeah. How about people? How do they live there at the time? How was the economy?
Okay.
Tell me the details. How about children and cities? How much destroyed? Please describe those.
Yes. My impression, I would very much, upon arrival in Seoul at that time, upon arrival in April 1954, we were boarded on a train which was supposed to bring us to Yangon Valley, which was the reserve or the area of the 24th United States Infantry Division. And we were given a place there to be the reserve contingent of the 24th U.S. Infantry Division. My impression as they brought us across the peninsula from Busan was totally area wherein there was no more building, there were no more houses, there were no more trees. But I noticed that the Korean people that were there in the field were growing. Korea area was green. In other words, Korean people were already cultivating for their, maybe for as a means of livelihood. And we were informed that this is the only way that they were able to survive. And the Korean people did not have any houses whatsoever. I never saw a single building or anything like that, because the total area from Busan all the way to Seoul and beyond that, as we arrived in the Yangon Valley, which was already covered, well forested and like that, and that is where we established our reserve position as part of the United Nations 24th U.S. Division. We truly, I personally admire the Korean people because, let me go straight to about in the year of much later on, when there was already a relative peace in the peninsula. Oh my goodness, Seoul was all roads leading to the central city. Buildings were already established, and when we were, luckily I was one of those who was able to participate in the revisit program of the Korean government, and we were received, oh my goodness, about 10 of us, veterans of the 2nd Battalion Combat Team, together with our spouses, we joined the 60th anniversary of the Korean War. And that was why we received some medals insofar as our participation as a Korean veteran. But we, personally, and my wife, was very much impressed that such an industry and resilience of the Korean people has produced such a magnificent recovery of the Korean.
So when you left Korea, did you ever think that Korea would become like this today?
I never, and all of us that revisited Korea never realized that here is a way to build a nation. Here is a way to come up from the ashes of war, establish freedom and democracy, nurture it, in order that people will be able to develop and have their initiative to have the progressive country. I wish sometimes that the Filipino people would do this instead of just, well, as an old man at 93 years old,
so
I would say that I wish the Filipino people would have the industry, the dedication to service, not thinking of what I'm going to get from the government. My goodness. And I think the Korean people should be very grateful that such an attitude, such a dedication to freedom and democracy has been cherished because of what we, as representing the PEPTOC battalion, tried to help in that country where once upon a time was almost totally overcome by the communist regime.
So you are very proud to see that Korea has transformed from the total destruction to 11th largest economy in the world.
We are very, very proud. And my participation here with the PEPTOC Veterans Association is a part of my wanting to spread out, especially to our descendants of the PEPTOC battalion, to let them realize that such a progress and their participation of individuals can do for the country. And we are very grateful indeed that in one of the programs of the Korean government is to further improve the educational profile of our country. Consider that one of the benefits which the Korean government has been extended to the descendants of our PEPTOC descendants, like our immediate children. And I will say that even up to our second generation PEPTOC descendants, they have taken advantage of the scholarship program extended by the Korean government. And I will even venture to say that several of us that are here who are already now directors of the PEPTOC Veterans Association are MBA graduates sponsored by the scholarship program of the Korean government. Excellent. Imagine Filipino being a mutual benefit assistance program, an MBA course. We are very, very proud and very happy about the circumstances that have happened at this time.
Do you know that here in Philippines, in the world history class, do they teach about the Korean War?
Well, yes. And I think the one very credible reason, or I think a nation such as the Republic of Korea, specifically the South Korean, should be a lesson to the whole world that they are not just thinking of themselves, but for the benefit of the entire world population. An example of a South Korean government that has extended the full recognition of freedom and democracy. And we think that some of it should be, sometimes we laugh at our own mistakes because our leadership, political leadership, our congressmen and our senators are quarreling with each other as to how much is supposed to be for this or for that, but never about what about the people, the people who needs it most. And I think that is the one advantage which the Korean government has centered on people, welfare for the people.
Very good. next year will be 70th anniversary of the Korean War breakup, and we are still divided. Do you have any special message to the Korean people?
Yes, I'd like to. I was very much impressed with the attempt of our very impulsive communist leader, Chairman Kim.
Yeah.
His attempt and his consideration in being able to come to our DMZ and talk with our President Moon of South Korea. I was very much impressed, and I felt personally, very happy that these two great leaders were once again be able to talk and exchange their views and be able to allow Koreans, South Koreans, North Koreans, to visit each other. In fact, that was why in our short stay at the DMZ, and we were trying very hard to understand what this was all about, because why there was a division of the North and the South. The attempt of Chairman Kim and likewise now President Moon to be able to understand each other is a great possibility that once again, while they remain to be in the South, or in the North, and the South being willing to extend further freedom and democracy is a great promise to the entire world.
You are amazing, sir. You are the living witness of the transformation of Korean society from the total destruction to one of the best democracy and economy in the world.
Correct.
So I am very thankful for your sacrifice and your service for the Korean people. Is there any other story that you want to say to this interview?
Well, on my own personal view, we should support now the effort of President Moon to be able to go out of his way to really understand that person who is there on the other side. But I think a little more, shall we say, a lot of things depend upon, they say, the United States is supporting this or supporting that. But regardless of who the other great powers are thinking of, one of the things that we have to convince Chairman Kim is his attempt at being able to prove that they are powerful and they can do it by themselves. Maybe as we go along, and with the example of the South Korean, he might eventually, we in the Philippines, we particularly are hoping that eventually the entire peninsula will be united and there will only be one democracy and freedom for the entire Korean population in this world.
Excellent. Thank you so much, sir. Yes. And it's my great privilege to talk with you and sharing your story and your perspective about Korea.
Yes, war and
I enjoyed it very much too. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.